Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Susan Brown, Director of the Center for Better Bones and the Better Bones Foundation. It's really my pleasure to be with you again today to discuss issues of importance to bone health. As you know, we here at the Center for Better Bones have spent decades researching the best natural way to maintain and regenerate bone health. We've championed over the years the fact that there's many nutrients important to bone health, and we've identified 20 key bone nutrients, many vitamins, many minerals. They're absolutely essential. And today we're going to talk about another nutrient group that is totally essential for bone health, and that is the essential fatty acids. We often think of vitamins and minerals. We don't so much think of fats as being really important to our health, but they're extremely important to overall health and very important to bone health. Now, the essential fatty acids, just as the name would suggest, are fatty acids that the body cannot produce itself. These are basic building blocks like vitamins that we need to consume in the diet. There's different types of essential fatty acids, so let's talk about those just a little so we can put into perspective the particular topic of the omega-3 fats, one very important group of essential fatty acids. And what today I'm essentially going to talk about is the value of omega-3 fats and why it's important to get a fairly high quantity of omega-3 fats in your diet for very good bone health and to prevent fracture as you age. But first, let's look at the whole picture of essential fats just really quickly. Essential fats are divided into two groups, what we call the omega-6 essential fats and the omega-3. And these have to do with the composition, with the carbon chains, the makeup of these two sort of fats. The omega-6 fats are from the vegetable oils, things like sunflower oil and safflower oil, soy oil and corn oil. These common vegetable oils that are very high in our diet. We consume a lot of them in all of the processed foods and often in the foods we make. And the interesting thing is these omega-6 fats are often damaged. They're damaged in the food processing where chemicals are used to extract the oils, where solvents are used, where they aren't stored or handled properly. So many of these oils we're going to see carry some negative implications down chain as they're metabolized by the body. There are, of course, nuts and seeds that are always great sources of the omega-6 fats, like pine nuts, one of my favorite nuts, these lovely little pine nuts, like sesame seeds, again, a very healing seed. These are black sesame seeds, but there's white, there's hulled and unhulled sesame seeds, and things like pecans. And of course, these nuts, when they're fresh and whole, will have a very healthy fat that hasn't been damaged. So these are the omega-6 fats, and they do a particular action in the body. And then there's the omega-3 fats. Now, when you hear omega-3, you probably think fish oils. And indeed, these fish oils are the major source of omega-3 fatty acids, are a really wonderful source and a source that we have consumed through our evolution for thousands of years. So you have fish oils. You also have flax as an omega-3. And many people talk about flax. People always say to me, well, can I eat flax for my omega-3? Is that adequate? Will that protect bone? I'm going to talk about the difference between fish oil and flax oil in a second. Another popular seed is chia. These lovely little chia seeds, these have a significant amount of omega-3. And walnuts have a bit of omega-3, for example. Again, another lovely nut you can get in whole form that has some omega-3s. We're going to talk about the difference between the fish oil omega-3s, which is really what I'm suggesting that we consume more of. Of course, all of these seeds would be great, flax and hemp, chia, but we're going to talk particularly about fish oils. And here's the reason. All of these essential fats are important to all of our health. In fact, every cell membrane is made of essential fats. The brain is largely essential fats. We need all of these essential fats to absorb calcium, to utilize calcium, to keep calcium in the bone and out of the arteries, to build healthy membranes and healthy cells. So we all need both types of these fats, the omega-6 and the omega-3. But what we see is with our diet of highly processed foods and highly processed oils, we consume much more omega-6 than omega-3s. And we're going to see that in our human evolution, as we evolve through the thousands of years, we have a genetic and digestive machinery that's used to more omega-3 fats and actually uses more omega-3 fats. And the interesting thing to this is that when you process these fats, when the body metabolizes these fats, the omega-6 vegetable oils go through a series of pathways creating arachidonic acid, which is very highly inflammatory, and we end up creating inflammation. Now, if you've been following my work, we know that osteoporosis and the breakdown of bone is largely an inflammatory process. So what happens with these vegetable oils, if we take a lot of the vegetable oils like we do, we end up with more inflammation. And you can see this is measured by prostaglandin 2, this interleukin 1, interleukin 6, a factor called TNF-alpha. These all increase osteoclast activity. Remember, the osteoclasts are the bone breakdown cells. So when we have high omega-6, we actually create inflammation, and a lot of our anti-inflammatory drugs, our non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, are really trying to quiet the inflammation that's caused by this high amount of omega-6 in relation to a low amount of omega-3s. Because what happens with the omega-3 oils as they're processed by the body, and the major oil is called alpha-linolenic acid of the omega-3s, these are through a series of pathways end up as EPA and DHA. Now this is what we recognize as the major fatty acids in fish oils. These are the major omega-3 fatty acid from fish. As it turns out, EPA and DHA end up being very anti-inflammatory. So what we see is that there has a need to balance the omega-3s with the omega-6s to reduce inflammation. The problem today is our diet is extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids, and many times these oils are damaged. And not getting cold pressed oils, using fresh nuts and seeds is a great idea, but the general population doesn't do it. And in fact, in Paleolithic times, actually, the ratio was 1-to-1, or even better, even more favoring the omega-3 fats. This is when animals were wild, they ate grasses, they ate seeds, they had more omega-3 fats, there were nuts and seeds, there were marine supplies. It is estimated by anthropologists that the ratio was 1-to-1, or even favoring the omega-3. Even in Greece, up until 1960, the ratio was just 1-to-2, that there were actually still more omega-3 fats in the diet. Now we see in the US, the ratio is anything from 16 omega-6s to 30 or even 40 omega-6s per every omega-3. So we've gone way to the extreme of much more omega-6 fatty acid, which translates into much more inflammation. And much more inflammation translates to much more bone loss. It's kind of interesting, in Japan, the ratio is just 4-to-1. They have still plenty of the omega-3 fats through the marine food, we presume. And in India, where there's different sources of omega-3 fats, in the countryside, they still have a fairly good ratio of omega-3 fats to omega-6, but in the cities, they have a predominance of these processed oils, omega-6s, just like we do. It's very interesting that this ratio, if you look around the world, and there's been several studies, that the higher the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6, the greater the fracture risk and the greater the loss of bone density. For example, a study was done in the United States clearly documenting this, and it's been done in many other parts of the world. So as we look around the world, we see, number one, that places that have higher omega-3 intake through fish, for example, have higher bone density, but they also have higher tendency to reduce fracture. And those populations, those people who consume less of the omega-3 fats actually have a higher fracture risk. For example, a recent study in Iceland, they looked at omega-3 consumption from fish, and they found that those people with the higher intake of omega-3 fats had a lower fracture risk. And for women, it was 25% lower, and for men, it was 45% lower. This is interesting because if a drug were able to reduce fracture by 25%, that's a lot, much less by 45%. And they found that people who had a higher intake of these omega-3 fats, a dietary intake or a supplemental intake, were able to had a significantly reduced fracture risk. An even more compelling study looked at blood levels. They actually looked at the blood levels of omega-3 fats in postmenopausal women. And this was a study in the US. And the women that fell in the highest third of blood level for omega-3 fat had 1/2 the hip fracture incidence. So again, a simple correlation, but pretty interesting. The women with higher blood levels, just in the higher 1/3, had 1/2 of the hip fracture rate. And these were older women. And again, if you just looked, other studies have just looked at the ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s, and they found that in the highest ratio, where you had more 3s to the 6s, there was 1/2 as many fractures. So if one is consuming a diet like we do in this country of very high omega-6 fatty acids, there's a couple things we can do. We can say, one, well, I'm going to make sure those are high quality fats. I'm going to have nuts and seeds. I'm going to eat the little pine nuts and the pecans and the sesame. And I'm going to get cold pressed, very high quality oils. That's an important thing. And I'm going to reduce the intake of these omega-6s, and I'm going to increase the omega-3s. Now, the omega-3s, as we mentioned, you can have your flax and which is one of the nice sources, and your chia and your walnuts. And of course, the fish oil is the richest source of omega-3. Now, let's just talk a second. Many clients ask me, they say, well, can't we just use flaxseed? Do I have to take fish oils? Do I have to consume fish? And here's the issue. What we want to get is the anti-inflammatory effect of these omega-3s. And it's largely produced by EPA and DHA. Flaxseed and hemp will give you alpha-linolenic acid, but it's very difficult to convert that to EPA and DHA. It's several pathways. You need several enzymatic activities. Many people have even genetic glitches that they can't convert this. And the conversion at best is very inefficient. So it's very wise to consume EPA and DHA directly so that you have directly the anti-inflammatory benefit. And as I stress, so many of the drugs we take, the anti-inflammatory drugs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, really are trying to compensate for this increased inflammation that's caused by these omega-6 fats, by such a high amount of damaged omega-6 fats that we consume today. And of course, if you need any other prodding if you say, gee, I'm not interested in bone, I'm interested in heart health, of course, you probably remember that even cardiologists now are recommending the use of omega-3 fats. In fact, the pharmaceutical industry has gotten permission to produce a drug, to make omega-3 fats a drug. The DHA and EPA, the fish oil, is a drug because they're so effective at reducing the risk of heart disease. And in fact, the American Heart Association suggests that we should all take between 600 and 3,000 milligrams of omega-3 fats, depending on our heart situation. Because remember, though, every cell membrane is affected by those omega-3 fats. The stickiness of the platelets is affected by the omega-3 fats. And if heart health and bone health isn't enough, there was an interesting study that looked at omega-3 fats in the blood of individuals here in this country. They looked over 16 years at who lived and who died. They started out and they looked at people for 16 years till they got to be 74. And they found that people with the higher omega-3 fats in their blood had a 27% reduced risk of dying by the age of 74, at the age of 74. they were still alive when they tested them. The people with higher omega-3 fats in the blood were living a lot longer. We're having a much reduced risk of death at the age of 74. There's lots of good reasons to seriously think, am I getting high quality essential fats, and am I getting enough omega-3? You know, it's interesting. I was brought up a Catholic, and of course there was this tradition way back when of having fish on Friday. And now we see that one of those ancient customs, that ancient custom had a good basis in that from these fish, and especially cold water fish, we can get these omega-3 fats, the EPA and DHA, which might otherwise be very difficult to consume. The issue, of course, with fish today is we have to try to clean the oceans, get fish that is not so laden with heavy metals. And of course, this is where the issue of using omega-3 fats, using the fish oil supplements, and certainly in the Better Bones program, we recommend fish oil supplements. We've actually produced a fish oil supplement that goes right along with the Better Bones program because they're so very important. Just like vitamins and minerals, essential fats, essential omega-3 fats are important. These fats have to be purified, of course, whether you take cod liver oil, whether you take a capsule, they have to be purified to reduce heavy metals. And it reminds us, doesn't it, that if we poison the environment, we're going to poison ourselves. And so we need to work, all of us, towards these environmental changes that'll help clean up the oceans, make fish safer. In the meantime, we eat moderate amounts of fish. And in fact, you might have seen the Environmental Working Group. If you wonder, well, which fish are the best to eat? We have some great agencies like the Environmental Working Group has produced a little chart of which fish seem to have less toxic heavy metals than others. And so essentially we're looking at cold water fish. Essentially we know the smaller fish don't accumulate quite as many toxins, don't eat as many other fish, so they don't accumulate those toxins as much. But you might check out the Environmental Research Fund and you'll see salmon, sardines, many other fish that are perhaps a little safer to use, a little cleaner than others. Omega-3s, omega-6, we want to balance. We want to move to the old-fashioned way when we evolve with lots of omega-3 fats, only high-quality omega-6 fat, fresh nuts and seeds whenever possible. And you should see a very direct benefit on bone health as well as on inflammation, generally within the body, within cardiac health, with overall well-being. So I hope that you understand a little bit more about this fairly complicated topic of omega-3 fats. I'm going to answer your questions in a second. But first, let's talk about a little bit about the optimum intake. So you may be saying, well, okay, remind me, how much should I be taking? A serving of 2 of cold water fish, great, a week. That'd be a nice thing to do. The suggestion by the American Heart Association is anything from 600 to 3,000 milligrams directly of EPA and DHA. Little pills like this may contain 600, like our Builder product. That's a great start. That's a good. And you may have higher levels if you find yourself at risk for heart disease and other inflammatory problems. And if you consume more of the damaged omega-6 fats, oils like this, that may be processed with chemicals and in a way that makes them hazardous, generally not so healthy, not so wholesome for us to take. Great, so let's take a minute and answer a few questions. We have some questions from last week. Let's see what questions we have from this week directly related to this topic here. This person is thanking me for the event. They're happy to hear it. I am having surgery next week. I do not want to take any drugs. What would you recommend for pain? Well, you know, that's a really interesting point. We always want to nourish ourselves with a lot of plant compounds. Like we really like things like quercetin and all these flavonoids from the fruits, particularly the colorful fruits and the colorful vegetables. But that's a really good point. If you're having surgery, these omega-3 fats really help to thin the blood. And so many people like to take aspirin to thin the blood, which, by the way, is not really recommended so much anymore. But you don't want to take the fish oils, high-dose fish oils with aspirin, because they both have a thinning effect. And if you're going into surgery, I wouldn't suggest you take a high dose of fish oils right before surgery, because it can actually make the blood a little bit thinner, which generally is wanted, but in surgery. So around surgery, you want to be a little careful. I wouldn't take high amounts of vitamin C. I would take moderate amounts of the nutrients, and then after the surgery, I would begin taking more extensive amounts of things like the omega-3 fats, quercetin, some very nice forms of vitamin C that alkalize. Good luck with your surgery there. What's the best form of omega-3 if I'm allergic to fish, shellfish, and supplements? Well, there is some omega-3 that's made from algae. There is some vegetarian omega-3 fats that you can see on the market. They're a little bit expensive. Then you would probably go to your flaxseed, which you can grind up. You'd want to use at least a tablespoon or so a day. Your chia seeds, your walnuts, those are all helpful. Plus, you will find on the market, the specialized nutrient market, some non-fish forms. They aren't nearly as concentrated of EPA and DHA. But you can go to the food factors then and hope that you convert the food factors to the EPA and DHA. Olive oil, olive oil is an interesting fat. Olive oil is monosaturated. It does not really have omega-3 fats. It has oleic acid and a series of other fatty acids, but olive oil is extremely beneficial for many other reasons, and many other ways olive oil stimulates osteoblast function by its polyphenolic compounds. So olive oil is great, but I wouldn't depend on it for my EPA and my DHA. It's interesting. Some people are asking about the other problems with low omega-3 fats, and one of them is mental acuity. That the brain has a large quantity of DHA in the cell membranes, and so if they're even talking about it in relations to Alzheimer, much less in child development. Very good idea, not only to reduce inflammation in the bones and in other parts of the body, in the heart, the coronary tissue, but also it's very good for brain health, to stimulate brain health. And isn't that the old idea, an ancient idea, that you take fish to have better thinking for a better brain? Let's see if we've got anything else interesting about fish oils here. And omega-3 fats. Okie dokie. So there were a couple questions from the last session, and I think we have a few minutes to try to answer some of these questions from the last session. Somebody wanted to know, how often should I eat curcumin? Curcumin is one of these fascinating foods, substances that comes from turmeric, that has been found to be very effective at, again, reducing inflammation through an antioxidant value and protecting the bone building cells. And curcumin, it would be great to take turmeric in your diet every day. We listed several ways that you can use turmeric in your diet. Some people put it in their smoothies. I certainly cook my foods in ghee with turmeric in that. Saute the turmeric in the ghee, and you get a nice amount of curcumin. The curcumin supplement can be used daily, and I personally use it. We use the Better Bones Super Antioxidant, has 250 milligrams of curcumin, and we're experimenting actually using higher dose curcumin for bone health, particularly amongst thin women. So curcumin, daily is a good idea to get it either in your food as turmeric or a supplement like the Better Bones Super Antioxidant, which will have a nice amount of curcumin that you could consume every day. Somebody asked a question about this exercise device, which is called OsteoStrong. By some it's called OsteoStrong, by others it's called the biodensity machine. And this is, we're going to talk about exercise in the future more. We're going to talk about how we can compensate for the fact that we sit so much. But this biodensity machine, or what some companies call OsteoStrong, is very interesting. It's a device that you in case you haven't heard about it, the person who asked obviously is trying to do it probably. It's a machine that you have to get. It's a big machine, a very expensive machine that these professionals have that you sit on and you get measured precisely, so that what you do is you exert a very strong force. Like you're sitting on this machine and they'll say, push as hard as you can. You push as hard as you can just for a few seconds. You do it with the upper body and then you do it with the lower body. It's sort of like an exercise machine, but you only spend a few seconds doing it once a week. And what this does is it puts an unusual force on the bone, an osteogenic force that sends, almost bending that bone and sending a signal to build bone density. We're going to talk more about it. I've seen some of my clients do it. It's once a week that you go to a special place. You do this. It's very tricky. It has to be set up by a professional. But I do think that putting that unusual load probably will stimulate bone. The clients I saw who did it did many other things, and they indeed had small gains in bone density. The one thing I would say about this is, like any other exercise, when you stop doing it, you're going to lose the benefits. And so they haven't done studies. They've started to do studies on this, certainly no long-term studies. But the byline here is, sure, try it. If it's near your house and you can go every week, give it a try. But remember that any exercise we develop, we want to keep it up. And we want to find exercises that we can do like at the different stages of our life. We want to find exercises that can help us maintain muscle as we go through all different stages of life. If the questioner happens to do the biodensity machine, let us know. Usually you test bone density a year. Let's see what happens. Certainly you can increase muscle strength, and any exercise that you do, you want to make sure you're increasing muscle strength, and putting a load on bone is a very good way to build bone and also to maintain muscle. So just to summarize, I think I'm not going to answer we have other questions, but we'll save those to just a general question and answer period. And if you have general questions, just send them in and we'll try to answer them in one of these Thursday Facebook Lives. But let's go back just 1 second to the omega-3 fats, because they're so very important. We hear so many things about fats being bad for us. There's many people who have gone on low-fat diets. Now we're finding the trend to go to a high-fat diet, that we find high fats that are low in carbohydrates. A lot of people like those. But what's important to us is that we establish a balance between the omega-6 and the omega-3s. So the byline is, reduce some of these processed oils, eat more fresh nuts and seeds. Avocados are very popular now. The pine nuts, the walnuts, the almonds, all these wonderful nuts. And make a special effort to get the omega-3s, particularly for bone health, heart health, mental health. Whether you increase your fish, which is fine, I personally think we're probably better with 2,000 or 3,000 milligrams of the DHA EPA. And so we tend to use supplemental form, either in pills, like in the omega-3 fat from Women's Health Network, or in cod liver oil, different forms. Remember, if you do cod liver oil, you want a low vitamin A content. So some cod liver oils are high in vitamin A. You want the DHA EPA without too much vitamin A. Maybe at least 600 milligrams, higher perhaps, if you have particular concerns of cardiac health or bone health. Essential fats will build bone, build your overall health. I hope you find a way to enjoy them. This is Susan Brown. It's been my pleasure. Send us your questions. Sign up for our blog. Have your friends sign up for our blog. We're going to try to show everyone how they can have lifelong better bones and a better body. It's my pleasure. We'll be talking to you next week. Bye-bye. See y'all later.